I wanted to welcome everybody. This is Childhood Anxiety, What Parents, Teachers, and Therapists Should Know with Dr. Ginny Ritchey. I'm Elizabeth from Summit Center, and I'm just here to kind of get us going. Our speaker today is Dr. Ginny Ritchey. She earned her doctorate in educational psychology at UC Berkeley, along with a credential in school psychology. Then she doubled down and also acquired the training and accrued hours to earn her license in clinical psychology. She's now been working in the field for 30 years, and she's been with Summit Center for close to a decade. Dr. Ritchey specializes in child and family therapy, particularly with the 2E population, quite exceptional kids. Also anxiety, emotional and behavioral regulation, depression, consulting with parents, and ASD and ADHD. She's passionate about her work and finds inspiration in the clients and families that she serves. And she's excited to present to all of you today. I wanted to let you know that the chat is not enabled today, and we just don't think we're going to have time to take questions at all. So if you have anything specific that you want to follow up, you can reach out to Dr. Ritchey, or you can schedule an appointment. I think that might be limited to California residents, but email inquiry@summitcenter.us, or there will be an email address at the end of the presentation. Okay, Ginny, if you're ready, you can take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm very honored and humbled that you're taking this hour of your busy day to listen to this presentation. I want to apologize up front that this presentation is so dense with information that I'm going to have a hard time getting through all of it in an hour. So as much as I would like to make this presentation more dynamic and answer questions that come up for you as I go along this presentation, what I'm hoping is that because I'm offering so much information, a lot of what I'm giving to you can be applied to your specific situation. And to echo what Elizabeth has already said, please feel free to reach out to me and ask any kind of question that you have, because the whole point of this presentation is for you to help the kid that you care about, whether you're an educator, a therapist, or a parent. Okay, so let me start. Let me give some background also, my personal life, just to give a little cred for myself. I've got twin teenage girls. So not only can I relate to anxiety on a professional level, I can also relate on a very personal level. I feel like almost I have more cred from having kids than any kind of training that I've ever had. So childhood anxiety, what parents, teachers, and therapists need to know. Thank you for the hearts, you guys. All right, prevalence. Anxiety is the #1 mental health problem in our country. An estimated 1 out of every 8 children have a diagnosable anxiety disorder. And I believe I've also heard it's even 1 out of every 6. Anxiety is the #1 reason why parents seek out a mental health practitioner, and it's considered a gateway mental health diagnosis. So when I say that, I mean that it can lead to secondary diagnoses. It's often linked to depression and even addiction if it's not found and treated. All right, so anxiety, you've probably heard a number of different descriptions or definitions of anxiety. But the definition that I have arrived at, as far as what I think sums up what anxiety is it's an overestimation of a problem and an underestimation of a person's internal resources and skills. So I think it's important to be aware of the signs to look for in your child, as your child may not be aware that the source of her symptoms is coming from the feeling of anxiety. So pay attention. Are they presenting as nervous, irritable, or on edge? Are they quick-tempered? Is their performance in school declining? Is their appetite or sleep disturbed? Are they avoiding places or people or events that they once liked to go to? Are they losing interest in activities they once enjoyed? And are they experiencing physical symptoms such as headaches or GI problems? If your child starts to exhibit any of the signs of anxiety, be curious and pay attention to whether or not she's experiencing any of these symptoms. Is she having recurring worries and stress about everyday life that feels out of control? Is she feeling restless? Does she have feelings of impending doom? Are there negative thinking patterns? All right, so there's many theories about why anxiety has increased over the past decade. One is the increased pressure to succeed in school and in life. I don't know about all of you, but my children by middle school had to figure out what sport and activity that they were going to specialize in by 6th or 7th grade. So one went all in for ballet and the other went all in for club volleyball. And we were also having to make decisions in middle school about classes that would then place them in the right classes in high school to advance them into the college that they want to go to. It's all consuming at such a young age. The constant access to the news and information. When I was growing up, my parents just shielded me from the TV and the newspaper and the magazines. And now there's ready access for our kids to be exposed to all the social political events in our world. And because they're exposed without our knowing, they're left with their imagination or underdeveloped brains to make sense of often nonsensical events. And then, of course, social media. I have a book that I want to recommend, which is by Jonathan Haidt, and it's The Anxious Generation, wherein he pools empirically driven evidence that links social media with the rise of childhood anxiety, depression, self-injurious behaviors, and even suicide. He has offered compelling ways that parents can control for the deleterious effects of social media. And he offers 5 in particular. No smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, and parents should petition a phone-free school and allow for more unsupervised play and childhood independence. And I also encourage all of you to build communities of families that abide by these principles so that your kids don't feel left out from social media, because that was my big pushback was my kids felt left out, and that pulls at a parent's heartstrings. So types of anxiety. I just don't think that we have the time to go over this. But yeah, there's various types of anxiety. Social anxiety tends to manifest at around 3rd grade. And that just happens to be about the same time that kids enter into Piaget's concrete operations, which is when they achieve reversibility of thought and decentration, so they're not as egocentric, and they're starting to develop their identities. So all of a sudden, they're starting to develop their identities at the same time that they're starting to realize that how I think about myself is different than how somebody might think about me, which is kind of scary. Separation anxiety is, it usually happens between the ages of 18 months and 3 years. It can be just a normal process of development unless it becomes ongoing and intense in nature. The rest, I think I'm just going to skip. All right. So the vicious cycle of worry. Anxiety is like a car alarm that is going off, but for no reason. There's a trigger that sets off our anxiety, which then sets off our physical symptoms, which then makes us believe that there's something to fear. Since we believe there's something to fear, our physical symptoms increase, and it goes on and on and on. So it's up to us as the adults in a child's life to interrupt this cycle. The cognitive model of anxiety is a very popular model that therapists often use when treating anxiety with kids or adults. And the theory holds that thoughts, behaviors, and emotions are all interlinked. So if you can change one, you can change all of them. So for example, if I was feeling super anxious for this presentation, I could use a tool. I could use some visualization and tap into my feelings within and take some deep breaths. So I'm changing how I'm feeling inside. And by changing the way I'm feeling inside, suddenly my thoughts start to become more open and present and realize it's just a presentation. You're going to be okay. And then my action is I go through with a presentation. So I think it's not only important for kids to understand why they're having these feelings at a biological level, but also because they find it riveting. And I love giving psychoeducation to to kids, especially the kinds of kids that I think so many of us have in our own lives, the twice exceptional or highly curious, talented kids. And it starts with telling them about our amygdala, and it's part of the limbic and emotional system of our brains. And whereas we once really needed it for survival, because without it, we wouldn't have survived. It served a protective mechanism from the dangers of our surroundings, such as dangerous animals, the lack of shelter, weather. Now, in present day, we don't need our amygdala so much. We don't need to survive from the elements of the climate or wild animals. We're safe, but our amygdala doesn't know that. It hasn't evolved at the same pace that our culture has evolved. Therefore, it kind of likes to work on overdrive sometimes. And I really talk about it like this at the kid levels so they get it. So when our amygdala is activated, it signals the adrenal glands to secrete adrenaline as well as cortisol and norepinephrine, which will serve to increase our heart rate and breathing and move blood from our stomach and brains and into our muscles for the preparation of fight, flight, or freeze. Well, let's see. So what I often use as a metaphor for kids, and I offer this to parents too, is it's kind of like the volcano monster. I mean, just kind of like a volcano where the environment changes. And now suddenly the volcano inside of us, we start feeling all these bubbles inside and all this weird stuff. And it's up to us to start to pay attention to what's happening inside of us before we erupt, which would be the fight mode. But it could also be the flight mode. Oh gosh, we're feeling so anxious inside. And And it's up to us to take care of all the bubbles and feelings inside before we get into the red zone, before we erupt. So let me go over the fight, flight, or freeze responses and what it might look like in our kids. The fight response it can often be misunderstood. These are the kids who could be perceived as the bullies on the playground, but actually deep down, they really believe that the kids are about to make fun of them, or they might be bullied themselves. And in fact, that could be real. They could have been bullied. And so now they're in fight mode. Their anxiety is so high that they're on overdrive. These are also the kiddos where parents come in and say, I just feel like I'm walking on eggshells with my kid. They come home and they're so irritable and they're so angry and aggressive, and I don't know why. They're in fight mode. So we have to be super careful and not assume the best in our kids. They don't want to be acting this way. So we need to be sensitive to what's happening inside of them. All right, the flight response. These are the children who tend to avoid perceived dangerous situations. And unfortunately, by doing so, it perpetuates the false belief about them. These are the kids that might procrastinate. They might avoid a party, but they really want to go to it, or not start an activity, even though it sounds fun to them. It's hard to live with anxiety. It's also hard to be a parent for a child with anxiety. So the common characteristics of anxious children. As you can see, these characteristics can be considered either a blessing or a burden. They are, in many ways, in my opinion, superpowers. Perfectionism. I tend to think of perfectionism as a consequence of anxiety. People with anxiety tend to want to take control of their surroundings to mitigate the unwanted feelings. So by making everything perfect, the chances of experiencing such fears as failure or inadequacy or judgment can be reduced. High intellect and highly verbal kids. Kids with high intelligence and high verbal skills often to have big imaginations, which can serve for them or against them. Overthinkers. We want overthinkers in our world, but not when it becomes anxiety. High achievers, same as perfectionists. The assumption is that if they can achieve high standards of excellence, then they don't have to worry about the fear of failure or being inadequate. I have a client who strives to be the best in everything, and deep down, it's because of his fear of being inadequate that he's not enough. So he just keeps working so, so hard. Kids who are intuitive, the highly sensitive kids, that is a superpower. These are the kids who are dynamite in emotional intelligence. However, on a more macro level, this trait can work against us, especially as parents, if we're taking on the socio-political climate, if we're taking on stress at work, if we're taking on the stress of our communities or the world and the state of it today. Our kids feel our stress, so we have to be mindful of that. Twice exceptional kids are more susceptible to anxiety. Highly intellectual kids that are underdeveloped emotionally, which I guess another way of describing it is being asynchronous, where you are highly intelligent, but another area of development is underdeveloped. Family history and genetics. About 30% of anxiety in our kids can be explained as hereditary. And kids who are introverted. I view introversion as a correlation to anxiety than just a characteristic. Children with anxiety tend to avoid situations that poses a threat, making them more introverted. But we also have to consider that maybe anxiety is a secondary effect of sensory overload and overstimulation, that the true root of avoiding public situations or parties is because they're overstimulated. And I've had a couple of clients over the years where I've worked with them, and it turns out that they should be seeing an OT before seeing me. So stay vigilant to that. So the core fears held by anxious people: inadequacy, failure, abandonment, rejection, and judgment. Oftentimes, our anxiety is actually the protective part of ourselves, shielding us from the bad feelings of our past with one of these 5 fears or experiences. Our memory recalls a past event that made us feel bad, so our amygdala wants to protect us from having those feelings again. So it's a kind of a reframe of what our amygdala is doing for us. It's actually trying to protect us from the bad feelings that could come from one of these 5 fears, core fears. It could be something else, but oftentimes these are the fears that come up the most. So the problem is that it works on overdrive by overgeneralizing or magnifying or catastrophizing otherwise benign situations. Another helpful reframe and discovery through research, in fact, is that we think of our sensation is by thinking of our sensation as in a different way. So let me give you an example. Just as when we lie to someone, we have this visceral reaction in our bodies about having to lie. So too, what scientists have found is that when our thoughts start to lie to us, the core of who we are has a visceral response to the lies that we're telling ourselves. So it's just a total reframe of how to look at the negative thoughts that we're having about ourselves, that we actually know ourselves better and think of ourselves in better terms than our thoughts are providing to us. And that's why we're having the visceral response, not the other way around. So what can parents and educators do to help children cope with anxiety? Okay, we're at the good stuff, you guys. All right, what children don't need. What time is it? Okay. Reassurance. Be careful not to unintentionally reinforce the idea that their fear or worry is warranted. So, for example, and this is so hard for parents to do. So, for example, let's say a kid is scared of a monster in their room at bedtime. The natural inclination for most parents would be, there's no such thing as a monster. In fact, I'm going to go look in every nook and cranny and see if there's a monster. We might look under the bed. We might open a closet, look for the monster. Nothing. But by doing that, it offers the suggestion to your child that, well, there could be a monster. And in fact, could for a child is likely. So instead, respond to their fear. Johnny, it sounds like your imagination is getting the better of you. If I looked for the monster, then I'd be telling your imagination that there's such a thing. And we know that's just so silly. All right. So then there's allow avoidance. This is so important. So this is what you don't want to do. By allowing for avoidance, we are reinforcing the idea that there's a reason to avoid the situation. And we learn through association. So remember how our amygdala works. When it's activated, it sets off our adrenaline, which then creates unpleasant fight or flight physical responses. However, eventually our brain will detect that it's activated for no reason and the amygdala will stop working. And eventually our amygdala is going to get tapped out and calm down. So if we leave the triggering event, we have our child leave the triggering event, their brain and amygdala is going to calm down and the association is going to be made. My body feels calm. Therefore, that place that I was avoiding must have been bad. I'm so glad I got away from it. As opposed to encouraging your child to stand in their fear, work through the stress and the cortisol, and make us an association of, wait a second, I feel calm and I'm in the triggering environment. Maybe my assessment of this situation was inaccurate. You're making a totally new neural pathway for your child. And the more you can do that for your child, the less likely they're going to have the aversion of the event. Transference. Okay, so transference is basically being mindful of how we are in a present situation. Kids are so in tune with how we're feeling. So if they pick up that we are feeling anxious about the event or how they're going to respond to an event, then they'll know it. I think it's also super important for us to be mindful of our own anxieties and our past and how that plays into how we're going to respond to our child when they are experiencing something like failure. Does that trigger something in you from your past? So it's up to us to work on our stuff so that when our children's stuff comes up, we've repaired our wounds ourselves. Attempt to get rid of the worried thought. Okay, so that's also something that just comes naturally. When someone says, I'm really worried about going to basketball practice because what if I'm the worst there? The natural inclination would be, oh, you won't be the worst there. Just work really hard and you'll be okay. But by, don't think about it that way. But by asking someone to get rid of the worried thought, they'll hold on to it even more. So for example, if I said, don't look, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to look. So we'll get into what you should do instead in the next slide. Rescuing and overprotection. Okay, so by giving children the subliminal message that they can't do it on their, by rescuing and overprotecting our children, what we're doing is giving our children the subliminal message that they can't do it on their own. And there might be a reason to be overprotected. So instead, encourage your child to take charge and be more independent. You're letting them know that they are safe and that they can do it. All right, what do children need? Pause and take inventory of how your own anxiety is. And then use it to educate and empower your child. So let's say you are feeling really anxious for them and you can't get rid of the anxious worry yourself. That's okay. There's another way you can go about it. especially if it's something that's bringing up something for you. I love Becky Kennedy's work, and she offers the idea of the back door method. And that is, let's say your child is worried about going to the first day of school, and you're worried about it too, because they've had a hard time in the past of going to the first day of school. Rather than fight it, because you know you can't, step inside of it with your child and sit down and go, hey, I understand why you might be worried about the first day of school. Guess what? I had a really hard time the first day of school myself. That way, you're joining your child, and they might feel understood by understanding that you also had a hard time the first day of school. It's so important to connect with your child before anything. They need to feel understood. If there's one thing that I hear over and over again from my kids that I work with, it's that they want to feel understood by their parents. Exposure. So it's the opposite of avoidance. You can do it at their speed and incrementally, and it may feel slow and painful, but baby steps lead to giant ones. By exposing your child to an unwanted place, person, and even a thought, they are creating new and more healthy associations. Limit reassurance. Externalize the fear. So essentially, you can do that in a number of different ways. You can name the fear. That sounds like Johnny. That sounds like your amygdala. Dan Peters uses that sounds like the worry monster. By doing so, it externalizes the anxiety, and it doesn't feel so all-consuming and overwhelming for a child. And it's not them, it's a thing outside of them that's keeping them from being their full selves. Prompt the child to reflect on their worry. So when I say that, oftentimes kids who have a lot of anxiety need a lot of reassurance from the parent. And by doing so, it's only perpetuating the anxiety. So when they ask questions over and over and over again, and you're answering them over and over again, it's just kind of cycling out. I need you to help me overcome my anxiety. Rather than answer their question, you can reflect back their question to them, offering them the autonomy and independence of reflecting on how maybe unnecessary that question really is. So, for example, if a child was like, Mom, am I going to get sick because that fly just sat on my fries and I ate it? You can ask back, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think a fly would make you sick? Do you think other people have had fries with a fly on them, and did they get sick? So they start to think about their own questions themselves and become more responsible for their own anxiety rather than making you responsible for it. Encourage your child to use their internal resources and let them know you believe in them. This is so important. Kids need to know that we believe in them. And so, let them stand in their fear. Let them know that you've got them and you believe in them. And then ask for the evidence. So when they start to ask questions, look for the evidence, just like I gave the example with the fly and the food. All right, and then PACE. PACE is an acronym that I often refer to when I work with parents and also for myself. It's an acronym that stands for playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And it's based on a brain-based parenting model developed by Hughes and Balin. And what they have found is that by approaching anxiety in one of these 4 ways, it helps to de-escalate the amygdala. I think it's also super important for us to realize how our kids who are highly anxious impact our own amygdalas. And I have a feeling that a lot of you can relate to this. So many of us have kids that are so anxious that they make us feel like we're walking on eggshells all the time. And because of that, what happens is our brains start to associate the uncomfortable feeling of our own children being around us because we don't know how they're going to respond and how they're going to react. So guess what? Our amygdala can also develop fight, flight, or freeze to our own children. That's okay. It's just the way our brains are designed. So if your child is in fight, flight, or freeze mode, and then our brains are in fight, flight, or freeze mode, this is not a good recipe. One of us needs to de-escalate the brain. And since we're the adults in the room, it's incumbent upon us to de-escalate our brains so we can respond to our children. And again, falling back on the PACE acronym, once our brains are de-escalated, we can then respond in a more playful or empathic or curious or accepting way, which is exactly what our kids need. Reframe the worry. Worry is a paradox. So this is what we covered earlier. Rather than tell your child to ignore the thought, help them through it by finding ways to tolerate or accept their feelings. So it's totally okay to feel anxious. Feeling scared is normal. Let them know. Consider the function of the worried thought. For the child, the thought or worry is serving a purpose. Consider what the benefits are for the worry and why they would hold on to the worry. We need to be their own detectives so that we can help them identify exactly what it is that their worry is protecting. Is it because they're afraid of being judged by all their friends? And then we can help them through that fear, which is what the anxiety is presenting. Break it down for the child. This can be either to make the worry seem more manageable, such as preparing for a test, to getting through over a phobia. So let me give you an example. When a client of mine didn't want to go to school because she was worried a boy would bother her, her mom broke the morning down for her, and it was brilliant. And she was able to get to school. The night before, she said, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to go to bed. And then 10 minutes before the alarm goes off tomorrow morning, I'm going to crawl in bed and we're going to cuddle. And then when the alarm goes off, we're going to get out of bed. We're going to brush our teeth, get our clothes on, eat our breakfast. Then we're going to get in the car. And then you're going to get through the morning. And then you're going to get through recess. And then you're going to get through lunch and you'll be home with me." By breaking it down for this child, she got through the day and the boy didn't bother her. So you can break it down in so many different ways. The success ladder you can use in any format for anxiety, but essentially what it entails is having the child brainstorm all the different ways of being exposed to this triggering event. I'll use being afraid of dogs as an example, just because it's easy. So you lay out all the different scenarios a child could be exposed to a dog. Let's talk, how stressful does it sound talking about a dog? How stressful does it sound playing with a dog? How stressful does it sound feeding a dog? And then, so we get everything down on the paper. We rank it by stress with a ladder. And at the lowest level of the ladder is the least stressful. And at the highest end of the ladder is the most stressful, and we start at the least stressful and we build up until we get to the most stressful. And you don't want, and you can rank it in a number of different ways, but let's say it's a stress level between 1 and 10. And the first stress level, they're at a 3. When they get to be about a 1 or a 2 by exposing them over and over again, then you can move up to the next level of the success ladder. Sorry about that. So that's a success ladder. Look for the evidence. We've already said that. Language matters. Okay, so this is also really helpful, and it also applies back to externalizing the fear. So when a child says, Mom, I'm really worried about this, be curious and say, okay, it sounds like there's a part of you that's worried. Let's say your child is worried about going to a party. They really want to go to the party, but they are really afraid that they won't know anyone. So you start with, okay, so it sounds like there's a part of you that's really worried about going to this party. I want to hear more. And there's another part of you that really wants to go to the party. Tell me about that part of you. By using language in that way, kids start to realize, like, oh my gosh, there's all different parts of myself. And there's a part of me that wants to go, and there's a part of me that doesn't want to go. And they can talk about it out loud and start to realize that, wait, maybe my desire to go supersedes and overrides this one single fear of maybe not knowing anyone. Be authentic with your own feelings. Model vulnerability, flexibility, trying new things, and facing your own fears. I know you all have heard this over and over again, but we are their number one role model. They're looking at us to see how we handle our own failures. They're looking at us to see how we handle new places, or our own fears or mistakes. So it's really helpful for a kid to hear that, oh my gosh, I made the biggest mistake today, and be okay with it. Or gosh, I was feeling really worried at work today because I had to give this really scary presentation, but I got through it. It makes them feel more human and normal. Be comfortable with your child's discomfort. This is so important, you guys. Your child will not know how to be comfortable with their own feelings of discomfort if you can't be comfortable with it. So if your child tells you that they're not good at something and you don't know how to respond, they'll know it. Acknowledge their feelings and let them know that it's hard not to be the best at something. So if your kid comes home and says, I was the slowest runner on the track today, it would be easy to dismiss it. Oh, you'll get better. Just keep trying. You can say that. I love Dweck's principles of incremental learning and pushing hard, and the growth model. But it's also super important to sit with that feeling with them. Wow, so what was that like for you? What do you want to do about it? That must have been hard. Let them know that they can handle hard feelings and you can handle their hard feelings too. And that taps back into the 5 core fears, which often bring to the table anxiety. They can handle inadequacy because we can. And then help them distinguish between discomfort and danger. So, for example, Johnny doesn't want to get on the bus because they've never gotten the bus before. That makes sense. So you can ask them, is this just really does this feel uncomfortable to you, or is this actual danger? Sounds more like it's uncomfortable to you because you've never done it before. That makes sense. But I don't know if it's dangerous. You can use terms like, is this a silly or a smart fear. Is this a possibility or a probability? Kids with anxiety tend to think every possibility is a probability. So it's helpful for you to help them distinguish between those two differences. Okay, so a simple formula on how to talk about anxiety with your child. Connect with them first, empathize, validate, be curious, gather information along with them as to why they're experiencing what they're experiencing. Help them reframe it. And we've talked about a number of different ways that they can reframe it, talk about it. The part of you sounds like the worry monster. Remind children that they can do hard things. If you believe in your children, they are receiving this message. All right. You guys can probably barely see this. It's such small print. But how much more time do I have? Okay. Evidence-based treatment. So when we work with anxiety, I tend to break it up into two different types of treatment. It's the bottom-up methods and the top-down. The top-down methods are everything that has to do with our thoughts and what we bring to the table intellectually and emotionally. And bottom-up methods are the things that we can do with our bodies to help us through the anxiety. So certain things that we can do that are bottom-up methods are pay attention to the warning signs. And I like to use, I'm going to jump to the zones of regulation. I have a feeling that most of you are familiar with the zones of regulation, but it's really important to help our kids identify how they're feeling. And oftentimes they can understand their feelings better through colors than through emotions. It just breaks it down easier. So how do we, I didn't see that question, I'm sorry. So first they just need to understand what their body is feeling and experiencing. And once they know that they're in the yellow zone, which is the critical zone of when we use these tools, they know that, okay, this is a time that I can use a bottom-up method. Once they get into red, which is anger, explosions, it's too late. I have so many parents who come to me and say, well, I try to give them a tool, but they don't use it and they're already in red. Once they're in red, it's over, game over. We can't, they just need to write it out. And then once they calm down, they're in yellow, we can start helping them to get back to green, which is the on button. That's go. That's when they're golden. So yeah, it's really important for us to know the warning signs of when they're in yellow and for them to know the warning signs for when they're in yellow, so they can use bottom-up methods like taking deep breaths or visualizations. When I talk about deep breaths, I talk about it at a scientific level to help kids understand that there's actually a science behind why deep breathing is effective, and it has to do with the vagus nerve, and I don't have time to go over it, but it's basically the nerve that triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms our nervous system down, and it goes behind our lung. So when we take a deep breath, it triggers that nerve and it sends a message to our brain that, wait, why are you in fight, flight, or freeze mode when we should be calm? And so when we do breaths enough, our body starts to reinterpret the event in a way that calms us. Muscle relaxation is when you start at the top of your head and tense it and release. And then you go through your whole body, tense your eyes and release, tense your shoulders and release. And you go through your whole body just to get relaxed. With deep breathing, you can use the Magic 8 method. And this is based on the principle that our brains can only hold 3 things in mind at once. So by asking a child to do a Magic 8 and breathing, holding their breath for 8 counts. They're doing 3 things. So whatever is causing the distressing event, they can't think about it because they're doing 3 things. If they're young, do it playfully, like they're blowing a balloon up. And I like to teach the slightly older kids, even younger kids, about the 6, 7, 8, I've got this principle, because kids like this because the Navy SEALs use it. So it's breathing in for 6, holding for 7, releasing for 8, and then they have a mantra. So the mantra that I learned was, I've got this. Top-down methods, reframing, changing the thought patterns. So helping kids recognize when they're having black or white thinking, when it might, they might be magnifying something, helping them with negative filtering, only seeing the negative in something, help them focus on the present, break things down. The glass ball and bouncy ball. This is an analogy I like to use, and I actually apply it to my own life. And essentially, it is the idea that life is made of 2 types of balls, the glass ball and the bouncy ball. The glass ball is something that is so important that we have to catch every single time. If we don't, it will break. Glass balls include something like somebody's health, our family, our friends. We got to catch those. Bouncy balls, on the other hand, not so important. They're all the other stuff. We can bounce it away. And when we're ready to catch it, we can catch it again. So just by breaking those pieces apart, it helps us gauge the importance of things, which also contributes to our anxiety. And then list what I know versus what I don't know. Sometimes we just have to be honest with kids, like, the first day of school is scary. Let's list all the things we know about it. We list everything we know about it. Let's list the things we don't know about it. Okay. Let's find out how many things we can learn that we don't know right now by going to school. Extrinsic rewards, specific for panic attacks. Certain methods like asking someone to look at objects that are near and far, asking them to find something of the 5 senses, find something that you see, find something that you hear, find something that you could taste, find something that you can touch. All of those help the person get distracted from whatever is upsetting them. And psychopharmacology. And when to seek treatment. Consider the frequency, duration, and intensity. The distress and impairment are chronic. Your child's quality of life is compromised. Your own life is compromised when you're not sure what to do for your child. And, well, you're feeling burned out yourself. Those are all indicators that it might be time to look for outside help. And I think I have 1 minute left. If you guys have any questions or anything, just feel free to contact me at my email address provided right there. Thank you for all the thumbs up and hearts. It means a lot. I hope that you got something out of it. I know that time is precious, and I just really appreciate that you took your time to spend it with me. And I just wish all the best for your kids. Kids are precious. And I hope that one way or another, they can overcome their worry monster. Thank you so, so, so much. Okay, be well.
Thank you so much, Ginny. That was great.
Thank you, Elizabeth.